Alright, how is that audio quality? You can like barely see it. I feel like this is better. Y'all, I'm over here struggling with this mic thing. Also, do you like my new spooky mugs? I have a bunch of them everywhere. This one is also a mug. Everything is a mug. We have the Scream mug. We have a bunch of ghosty, like, iced coffee mugs. We got this guy. We got a little cup. We got a witchy one over there that lights up. I went to TJ Maxx, if you can't tell. And Home Goods. First time myself going to Home Goods, I had no idea how good everything was. Hey guys, my name is Haley, and today we're going to be filming some spooky book recommendations, mostly horror. I think I'm going to title this Horror Book Recommendations, and we're going to jump right on into it. It's been a while since I made one of these, and I want to make more before spooky season is over, so let's go. The first one I have is me not hitting the mic. The first recommendation I have is Stolen Tongues. I loved this. I will say the ending was not my favorite, and that was the only reason it was not a 5-star for me. But the beginning and the middle of this is so creepy. It's about these people who go out to this cabin in the middle of the woods. There's something stalking outside the cabin, and there is a lot of lore in this area where they're at of this creature that comes out and is very similar to, I don't want to say the actual words. Flesh pedestrian is the word I will use because the other word scares me. And that is kind of what this is based on. It has a bunch of different voices. It copies voices. It's so scary. And I highly recommend the audiobook. If you have any other option to read this, if you can pick any of them, please pick the audiobook. It's great. My second recommendation is Hidden Pictures. This was a book that I read in the span of like 2 days. I read it at this silent book club not even a couple months ago. It was like earlier this year, if not late last year. I don't really remember. But this is about a little boy who starts drawing really, really creepy pictures. And this one, I do really like the audiobook, but I think this is one that is better read physically because the pictures are what makes the book so creepy. I love me a spooky little child thing as someone who works with children personally. I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but I really liked this. It was a very, very fun read. Next up is an oldie for me, but a goodie, and that is The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. This is about a girl who gets a job. She lies to get this job that she knows how to like do all of this cave diving and like cave expedition. The entire time she is like on an intercom with this other woman who is supposed to be keeping her safe and like telling her where to go and everything. And it is a sapphic romance during this incredibly creepy cave dive expedition where like everything seems to go wrong. It seems like something mysterious might be happening down there, and this to this day is still one of my favorite horror wrecks, as well as sapphic wrecks. And I feel like there are not enough of that combination of those two things, but I highly recommend this. Please check it out if you've never heard of it. I feel like this is a very underrated book. I don't hear a whole lot of people read it on BookTube, at least. Next up is a weird little book that I got as a gift one time, and that is I Found Puppets Living in My Apartment Walls by Ben Farthing. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's also very shiny. I apologize. But this is about, this is like the story of, if you know of that horror like game or story that's going on right now, I forget what it's called. Is it Fun Home? I think that's what it's called. But it's basically the idea of like there was this TV show from like the 80s and 90s that's very heavily influenced by Sesame Street. And it's the characters from that. There's like a mysterious thing going around the creator of the show and the people who worked on the show. And the characters from that start to pop up in this person's life when he goes to clean out his grandfather's apartment. This falls more into cosmic horror if you are a fan of that, but I highly recommend this weird little tiny book. But I thought it was very fun. And if you're a fan of that game or like series Fun Home, this is very similar. I highly recommend. Is it Fun Home or is it Fun House? If I'm wrong, I'll put it down below. I'll figure out what it's called. No, it's called Welcome Home. That's what I'm talking about. The Welcome Home game that's very much like Sesame Street. It's like a website you can go to, and it's like this found footage, but it's like an ARG type thing. I like it a lot. It's called Welcome Home, not Fun Home. Fun Home is a book and a play. Next up is a book nobody's been able to have me shut up about since I read it this year, and that is The Spirit Bears Its Teeth. If you know me, I don't like historical fiction. I have discovered that the only way to get me to enjoy historical fiction is to make it queer and make it horror. And then I will apparently love it. But apparently I need a combination of all three of those things to read historical fiction and like it. But this is the story about a trans boy in, is it the 1800s? Yep, 1883. And he is sent to this finishing school that is supposedly haunted. And people at this school apparently have this thing called veil sickness, where they start to like lose their minds. And it's about these violet-eyed children. It is fascinating, but the part about this that I loved so much was the queer found family of this trans boy in this time period where his family is just determined to marry him off as the perfect like wife to someone, and he does not want that because he knows that he is not a girl. And it made me sob. It is what made me obsessed with Andrew Joseph White. I just got his new book pre-ordered. I read his other book. I cannot recommend this author enough, but especially this one. This book has my heart. I love it so much. It's so spooky and creepy and has the best queer found family. There are some trigger warnings for like queer trauma and things like that, and that, so please check your triggers, but highly recommend. Next up is an author, because I read both of his books and I have his novella that comes out like next month pre-ordered. And that is the first of which, my favorite of his, being Mary by Nat Cassidy. This is the story about an older woman who is going through menopause and starts seeing these like weird ghostly angel-like creatures in her bathroom. She goes to the doctor and tells the doctor this, and the doctor just goes, I think it's just part of menopause. So it's a lot of like gaslighting of like female experience when it comes to their health. She also like can't look into the mirror anymore because whenever she looks in the mirror, her face like starts melting off. And he also says that's just part of her menopause, and it's like, dude, no, it's not. That's not normal. But she moves to like her hometown with like, I think it's her aunt or her sister or something, in the middle of nowhere desert, and continues to see these creatures, and then unravels a sort of like cult like mystery in this place. And I meant to like start this book and read maybe 50 pages of it when I first read it, because it's like 500 pages, sorry, 400 pages, and I read it in like 3 or 4 hours accidentally one night and tabbed the hell out of it, and I loved it so much. I think this is peak horror, especially like pacing wise. I felt like this book was perfectly paced, and that's what made me love it so much and not be able to put it down. And then Nat Cassidy's other book, which is Nestlings, I gave this 4.5 stars. The author's note in this made me bump it up to 4.5 stars, hearing why he wrote it. But this is a story about this couple who wins a lottery to live in this, oh, there's hair everywhere. This couple who wins a lottery to live in this like high-rise apartment in New York City, and it's like really sketchy. There's definitely something weird going on. They move in and there doesn't seem to be anybody else on their floor. There doesn't seem to be very many people living here. They feel like something is off. And our main character is disabled. She uses a wheelchair, and that's a big issue because this building is not built to be accessible to people like her. And they start to suspect that the reason they got picked for this lottery is because they have a newborn baby. And for some reason, this building really wants babies. And I'm not going to tell you anything else because that's a huge spoiler, but I really enjoyed this. I don't think it was as well paced, even though it's much shorter, as Mary. But the author's note and all of his reason for when and why he wrote this bumped this up to a 4.5 star for me. I highly recommend Nat Cassidy's works in general, and I cannot wait for him to write more things because I need more. Next up is another book I feel like I keep talking about, and that is The Invocations by Crystal Sutherland. Once again, is my general PSA, if you are seeing this and you have the like, I think it's the Evernight edition with the skeleton on the sprayed edge, please give it to me. If you see it for under $100, please send it to me on Bookstore and send it to me somewhere. I have been looking for it for months and I can't find anything under $100, and I need the Mercari resellers to chill and sell it for a reasonable price. Thank you. That is Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But this is a story of 3 girls. It is also a queer story, queer horror. The first chapter of this is probably one of my favorite first chapters I've possibly ever read. Like, I started to read it just to try it out, and I was like, I'm obsessed with this. And I can't tell if that's the general consensus with this book or not, because I've seen people like half and half on it. People thought it was okay and people who really, really loved it. But this blends so many of my favorite things with queer horror and like paranormal aspects and witchy. It's fantastic. But this is about 3 girls. One girl who is trying to bring her sister back from the dead, another girl who is the daughter of a billionaire and has been like cast away and sent to live in this house and definitely has some sort of curse gone wrong with her body and her soul. And then the third girl, who is an orphan who has grown up by herself, is a caster of spells, so she is a witch. But the way that spells work in this world is that they are tattooed onto your body, and sometimes spells can go wrong. So that is our cast of characters. I adored this. This made me want to pick up Crystal Sutherland's other book, which I definitely gave away several years ago because I wasn't that interested in it, and now I'm kicking myself for that. So highly recommend. This is on my favorite books of this year, as well as Mary. Next up is this tiny little novella that I believe I got on a Stuff Your Kindle Day, and that is The Patient Routine. And this is about a non-binary character who goes into a hospital for some sort of like to get looked at because they believe that something is wrong. And while they are in this hospital, the hospital goes on lockdown. And since it's such a short little novella, I'm not going to tell you much more than that, other than if you have any sort of triggers for like obsessive, like OCD, like obsessive compulsive things, especially to do with body horror, do not read this. It is written in verse, which I really enjoyed. It makes it a very, very fast read, but I feel like not enough people have read this, and I was actually floored by how much I enjoyed it. So definitely recommend this one because I feel like it's underrated. Next up is a newer favorite of mine, and that is The Merciless. I and everyone else remember when this book came out because everybody wanted it for this cover, and I was like, at that time, I was a Christian, and I was like, I can't read that book. It has a pentagram on the cover, but I've always been interested in it because I really like witchy things. And this is about a girl who moves to a new town because her mom is an army officer, so she moves around a lot. She tries to befriend these girls at school, and one night she gets invited to help another classmate of theirs, and things go downhill really, really fast when she gets locked in a house. And everything spirals from there. I have been reading this whole series. I don't know if it's a popular opinion for people to like the rest of the series, but I've been loving the rest of the series. From what I hear, this is the only one that people really like. If I'm incorrect, please let me know in the comments down below. But this is so gory, so please be aware of that. If you do not like gore, please do not read this. But again, with this one, and with a lot of horror for me, the pacing is the most important, and this, from like halfway through the book and onwards, is just a wild ride and does not let up in the pacing. So I recommend this whole series, but especially this first one, because that seems to be the fan favorite. And then I have episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. Once again, if you are going to read this book, please listen to the audiobook. Please. I beg of you. The audiobook has sound effects. It is a full cast narration, and it is about these ghost hunters who go to this haunted house to get like footage for their TV show to like boost their ratings, otherwise they might have to cancel the show. And it turns wild. There's a portal at one point. They get ghost footage. It's the craziest ride. I just listened to this like a couple of weeks ago, so you will hear me talk more about this in a wrap up very soon. But I highly recommend this. The audiobook is fantastic. Like 6 out of 5 audiobook, about a 4 out of 5 star for me personally, but I really, really enjoyed this. This is a great haunted house story. Except we also have a newer read for me, and that is Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. I read Chuck Tingle's other book, Camp Damascus, I want to say late last year, and loved it. And I actually want to reread it because I read it way too fast whenever it was I did read it. I want to read it for my religious trauma video I have coming up soon. But this just came out. I've been anticipating it since he announced it because I really liked Camp Damascus. And this is about a screenwriter who writes for this writes within Hollywood for this famous TV show. He's written a lot of like stuff for scary movies and stuff. He's a horror writer in Hollywood. He walks into the office one day and they tell him that he either needs to kill off his gay characters or they're not allowed to be gay, essentially, like, or they're not allowed to have a kiss on screen or something like that. And he's horrified, and like this is a saying within Hollywood of bury your gays, of like everybody within Hollywood is only interested in adding queer characters if there's some sort of tragedy to it. There's no like queer joy. And our main character is not okay with that and gets very upset and tries to come to a decision of what he's going to do about the situation. And as he's coming to that decision, he is being haunted by some of his own characters. And he cannot figure out how they exist. He thinks they're cosplayers at first. There's a lot of humor in this. He thinks they're like cosplayers coming to like mess with him to get him to change his mind. He thinks it's the company trying to get him to change his mind to kill off his characters. And it is a wild ride. But my favorite thing about this is that our main character acts the way you want every single person in a scary movie to act. Because most people in scary movies are like, why? Why are you doing that? Why would you yell in the middle of the forest when you know there's a murderer? Like, why would you run upstairs when you can't escape? Stuff like that. He does exactly what we all want scary movie characters to do. Like, he literally punches the ghost in the face at some point. And I was like, thank you. That's what I've always wanted in a scary movie. But I loved this so much. I'm so excited that this actually seems to be getting quite a bit of hype for people who did not know who this man was. And I highly recommend following him on Instagram. This author is very interesting because he never shows his face. He always wears like this pink bag over his face, if you didn't know that about him. But I love this. I cannot recommend this enough, and this is already on my favorite books of the year list. Even though, again, I only filmed that like 2 months ago, and I already have like 4 new books for it. And then last is one of my favorite books of all time that I feel like I haven't talked about on here at all. It's so not very much. And that is Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. This is probably my most annotated book that I own. I have read this twice. I'm hoping to read it again soon. I have so many annotations, and that is because it is about this little boy who vanishes in the woods for quite a long time and then comes back, and then his parents can just tell that something is wrong with him. There's also a character in this who is like a very, very religious Christian, and she seems to have a virgin birth or like a virgin pregnancy, and she can't figure out what's going on. There's a lot of imagery in here for people who are scared of deer. The deer imagery in this is terrifying and made me kind of scared of deer. The religious commentary in this is the reason that it is one of my favorite books of all time. I think it's fantastic. And being inside the head of the girl in this, who is like our Mary character, is fascinating. But I love this book so much. I can't even explain it to you other than like the one thing I do remember being a big part of this that I feel like is not a spoiler is that Christopher, our main character, feels like he needs to build this treehouse in the woods where he went missing, and we don't know why. And he has an imaginary friend. And this has been one of my favorite books for years. The first time I listened to it was on audiobook, and then I read it physically like a year or so later. I'm hoping to reread it again soon because I want to chat more about it. But again, most annotated book that I own, probably, and one of my favorite horrors of all time. But yeah, that is my final and 13th recommendation. Bah. But yes, those are some horror recommendations from me. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.